When a bleeding Mafia boss collapses into her empty restaurant on Christmas Eve, she saves his life, never realizing he came looking for her. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. Snow drifted past the diner windows in lazy spirals, catching the glow of the neon open sign that buzzed weakly in the corner. Emma wiped down the counter for the 5th time, not because it needed cleaning, but because the silence felt too heavy without something to do. Christmas Eve always pressed on her chest like that, soft, quiet, and a little lonely. Most people were home with family, warm lights in their living rooms, presents tucked under trees. Emma had a pot of decaf brewing for no one, a jukebox humming old holiday tunes to empty booths, and the hum of the heater that rattled like it was giving up on life. She'd offered to take the shift so the others could go home. She didn't mind. At least that's what she told herself. She glanced at the snow collecting against the glass and whispered under her breath, "Merry Christmas, Emma." It sounded hollow. The bell above the door shattered the stillness. Emma jerked upright, dish towel slipping from her fingers. She expected a tipsy traveler or a last-minute customer hoping for pie. What she got instead was a man stumbling through the doorway, snow dusting his dark hair, one hand braced against the counter as he swayed. "Sir, are you all right?" she called, stepping out from behind the register. He lifted his head, and her breath caught. His eyes, deep, dark, and unfocused, locked onto hers with an intensity that didn't match the weakness in his body. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but the sound died on his lips. When he pulled his hand from his side, Emma saw the red smeared across his palm. Blood. Her heart lurched painfully. "Oh my God! Sit down!" she rushed, guiding him toward the nearest booth. He was heavy, his muscles rigid with tension, but he followed her lead like instinct alone moved him. He collapsed into the seat, jaw clenching hard enough to crack. "You're hurt," she whispered. He gave a faint, humorless laugh that dissolved into a grimace. "Just a scratch." The dark stain spreading across his shirt said otherwise. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the first aid kit under the counter. She'd never dealt with anything more than kitchen cuts and a sprained wrist, but the way he looked, pale, sweating, breath shallow, told her she didn't have time for doubt. "Please don't pass out," she muttered, kneeling beside him. He looked at her then, really looked, his gaze sharpening with something sharper than pain, something like recognition, or disbelief. "You're alone," he said quietly. She blinked. "Yes?" He exhaled through gritted teeth. "Good." Good? She didn't understand. Was he dangerous? Was someone following him? Her pulse hammered as she tore open gauze and pressed it against his side. He hissed, grabbing the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. "Sorry," she breathed. "No," he rasped. "Don't apologize. Just don't stop." His voice had weight, authority wrapped in exhaustion. He seemed like the kind of man used to giving orders, not asking for help. The bell jingled again from the wind outside, making her jump. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not hard, but firm, precise. "Nobody else," he murmured. "Tell me nobody else is coming." She swallowed, throat tight. "No one. It's just me." "What happened to you?" His eyes darkened, unreadable. "Wrong place, wrong people." Emma pressed harder on the wound, feeling his muscles twitch beneath her palm. Snow continued to fall outside, peaceful and uncaring, a stark contrast to the storm sitting in her booth. He breathed raggedly, meeting her gaze with a steadiness that sent goosebumps across her arms. "You saved my life by opening that door tonight," he said, voice low and strange. Her heart hammered at the sincerity buried in the pain. "I just work here," Emma whispered. His lips curved into the faintest, bleakest smile. "Not tonight." The neon light flickered overhead as the snow piled higher, and Emma realized that the loneliest night of the year had just become the most dangerous, and the most unforgettable. Emma braced her shoulder against his as she helped him slide lower in the booth, his weight dragging her down with him. He wasn't a small man, not by any stretch, and every muscle under her touch felt tense, coiled, like a predator forced to lie still. He shouldn't have been conscious. Not with that much blood. "Please," she urged, breath shaky. "Let me call an ambulance." "No." His answer cut through the room like a blade. Quiet, but absolute. His hand shot out, gripping her forearm with surprising strength, for someone seconds from collapsing. "No hospitals." "But you're bleeding." "I said no." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "Trust me." Emma froze. Trust him? A stranger who walked in leaking blood at nearly midnight on Christmas Eve? Everything rational inside her screamed that she should run, scream, call the police. Do anything but stay beside the man whose presence filled the tiny diner like a storm about to break. But then he blinked slowly, and the edges of his mask slipped. His eyelids drooped, breath faltering. He wasn't just injured, he was losing the battle to stay upright. The hand gripping her loosened, fingers trembling. Without thinking, Emma slid closer, her hands going to his shoulders to steady him. He felt cold, too cold, beneath her palms. "You're going into shock," she murmured. "You need more pressure on the wound. You need to lie down." His gaze flicked to hers, dark and burning with something unspoken. A warning, yes, but also a plea. It softened something in her chest. "I can't lie down," he rasped. "If I do, I won't get up again." Her breath hitched. "Then let me help you stay awake." A faint smirk ghosted across his lips, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "You shouldn't want to help me." "I don't want to watch someone die," she whispered. He stared at her, really stared, as if her answer was something he hadn't heard in a long time. Maybe ever. His eyes were impossible, sharp and commanding one moment, then flickering with exhaustion and something almost vulnerable the next. His lashes lowered, and she worried he was drifting. Hey, she said quickly, tapping his cheek lightly. "Don't go to sleep. Look at me." His eyes opened again, and the force of his gaze hit her like a physical thing. "You're not safe," he murmured. Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" He swallowed, jaw tightening. "If anyone followed me," his fingers twitched toward the entrance, "they can't find me here." Emma felt a chill curl down her spine that had nothing to do with the winter wind clawing at the door. "Who are you?" His lips parted as if to answer, but instead he exhaled shakily, a sound edged in pain. "Not someone you want to be alone with." "Too late for that," she said gently. A low, strained chuckle escaped him. "You should have run the moment I walked in." "Maybe," she admitted. "But I didn't." He shifted, grimacing. "Why?" Emma didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know why her fear kept tangling with something warm, something stubborn. The truth slipped out before she could polish it. "Because you looked like you needed someone." His eyes softened, fractionally, dangerously, before they hardened again. He reached for her wrist, not gripping it this time, just resting his fingers there as though he needed the contact to stay grounded. "Don't be kind to me," he whispered, voice fraying at the edges. "Not this kind. You don't understand what you're inviting." She swallowed. "Then explain it." He held her gaze for a long, tense second. "I can't," he said. "Not while I'm bleeding all over your floor." Emma glanced down at the spreading crimson stain, panic rising. "Then let me fix that." His smirk returned, a ghost of it, faint but real. "Bossy." "You're dying." "Still bossy." She grabbed more gauze from the kit and pressed it to his side before she lost her nerve. He sucked in a sharp breath, jaw clenched tight, one hand slamming against the table to keep from crying out. Emma felt the warmth of his blood seep through her fingers, and her stomach tightened. Not with disgust, but fear. For him. He exhaled slowly, eyes returning to hers, dark and unreadable. "You're either very brave," he murmured, "or very foolish. Maybe both." His breathing hitched again. Sweat dotted his brow. He was slipping. But before he did, his fingers wrapped lightly around her wrist again. An anchor, a promise, a warning all at once. "Don't let go," he whispered. Emma didn't know why those words sent heat rushing through her chest, but she nodded. "I won't." His eyes shuddered, his body sagging as consciousness finally began to drag him under. And Emma realized, whoever he was, however dangerous he might be, tonight, she was the only thing keeping him alive. Emma locked the front door with shaking hands, the metallic click echoing far too loudly in the empty diner. The neon sign still glowed in the window, but she flipped it to closed anyway, her heart pounding as if someone might burst in at any second. "Come on," she whispered, slipping her shoulder under the stranger's arm. "We need to get you out of here." He was heavier than he looked, all solid muscle and dead weight as he leaned into her. Blood had soaked through the side of his shirt now, a dark, spreading bloom that made her stomach twist. Every step toward the back room felt like a gamble she couldn't undo. "You're stronger than you look," he muttered, breath uneven. "Focus," she said, teeth clenched, as she pushed open the door to the storage room. Christmas lights were strung haphazardly along the shelves, her doing earlier that week, a sad attempt to make the space feel less bleak. Now they cast a soft, multicolored glow over the concrete walls and the battered old cot she guided him toward. He collapsed onto it with a groan, head falling back, chest heaving. For a terrifying moment, his eyes fluttered, unfocused. "Hey, stay with me," Emma said quickly, bracing herself on the edge of the cot. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, counting the frantic pulse beneath his skin. Too fast. Way too fast. "I'm here," he murmured, eyes sliding back to her face. "I don't plan on dying tonight." "Good," she said, swallowing hard. "Because I have no idea what I'm doing." A faint curve touched his lips. "You're doing fine." She wasn't convinced. Emma grabbed the scissors from the first aid kit and hesitated, then carefully cut away the fabric around the wound. The smell of blood hit her immediately, coppery and thick. Her hands trembled so badly, she had to pause, breathing through her nose until she could steady them. He watched her the entire time. Not with the glazed look of someone barely conscious, but with sharp, intent focus. His dark eyes tracked every movement, every flicker of her lashes, every breath she took. It felt less like he was watching her tend a wound, and more like he was carving her into memory. "You don't look away," he said quietly. She glanced up, startled. "What?" "Most people can't look at blood," he continued, "or pain. They flinch." Emma shrugged weakly. "I grew up helping my mom with my brothers. Scraped knees, broken noses. You learn to deal." "Still," he murmured, eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't look away." She pressed gauze to his side, and he sucked in a breath, muscles going rigid beneath her hands. She felt it then, the sheer control it took for him not to make a sound. "Sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." His voice was rough, but steady. "I've had worse." Her stomach twisted. "That's not comforting." His lips quirked faintly. It wasn't meant to be. She cleaned the wound as best she could, hands moving on autopilot now, fear replaced by determination. Every time she leaned closer, she was acutely aware of how close they were. His breath brushing her cheek, the heat of his body seeping through the thin barrier of her sweater. "You still haven't told me how this happened," she said quietly. His gaze slid away for the first time, fixing on the string of Christmas lights above them. Red, green, gold. The colors reflected in his eyes, softening them in a way that made her chest ache. "Wrong place," he repeated. "Wrong timing. That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." She frowned but didn't push. Something told her that pressing him now would only shut him down completely. Whatever truth he was hiding sat heavy on his shoulders, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know it, at least not yet. She wrapped the bandage tightly, securing it with tape. Her fingers brushed his skin more than once, each accidental touch sending an unexpected jolt through her. She tried to ignore it. "There," she said softly. "That should slow the bleeding." He exhaled, relief flickering across his face before he masked it again. You just saved me a lot of trouble. She gave a small, shaky smile. Merry Christmas. For a moment, something cracked in his expression. His jaw tightened, and he swallowed, eyes darkening with something that looked dangerously close to regret. Merry Christmas, he echoed, voice low. They sat in silence for a beat, the hum of the lights and the distant sound of wind outside filling the space. Emma became painfully aware of how alone they were, how vulnerable. His eyes lifted to her again, intense and unreadable. You shouldn't be this close to me, he said quietly. Probably not. And yet, he murmured, gaze lingering on her face. You're here, patching me up under Christmas lights like I'm just another man. She met his eyes, heart pounding. Aren't you? Something dark and dangerous flickered in his gaze. No, he said softly. But tonight, you're the only one who doesn't see that. And Emma realized with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold, that whatever she had just stepped into, it was already too late to walk away. The bandage held. Emma noticed it the moment she finished cleaning her hands at the sink in the back room. The bleeding had slowed to a stubborn seep instead of a steady flow, and the man, no, the stranger, was breathing more evenly now, his shoulders no longer rising with quite the same strain. She turned back toward him, drying her hands on a paper towel. He was sitting upright against the wall, long legs stretched out in front of him, one arm braced casually at his side, as if he hadn't come within inches of bleeding out on her floor less than an hour ago. Too calm. That was the word that kept circling her mind. You should rest, she said quietly, at least for a little while. He looked up at her, eyes sharp despite the pallor of his skin. The pain was still there. She could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his fingers curled slowly, deliberately. But it was controlled, mastered. I will, he replied. For a moment. Something about the way he said it made her think he didn't often allow himself moments. Emma hesitated, then sat down on the edge of a crate opposite him. The Christmas lights hummed softly above them, casting warm colors across his face, softening lines that looked carved by a harder life than she could imagine. You never answered my question, she said. Who you are. His gaze lingered on her for a long beat, as if weighing something, measuring her. Not like a threat, but like a decision. You really want to know? He asked. Her pulse skipped. I think I deserve to. A corner of his mouth twitched. Fair. He shifted slightly, careful of his injury, then lifted his eyes to hers again. When he spoke, his voice was steady, unflinching. My name is Dominic Caruso. The words landed like a physical blow. Emma felt the air leave her lungs. Her mind scrambled, piecing together fragments she'd heard over the years. Whispers from customers, headlines glimpsed on TV screens in the diner, rumors passed in hushed tones. Caruso. Dominic Caruso. The man who controlled half the city's ports. The man politicians avoided and criminals feared. The man whose name was never spoken too loudly. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the crate. You're... She trailed off, unable to finish. Yes, he said calmly. That one. Her heart pounded painfully. Fear surged, hot and immediate, but tangled with something else she didn't expect. Confusion. Disbelief. Because the man sitting across from her didn't look like a monster. He looked tired, bleeding, human. You should be terrified right now, Dominic continued, studying her face. Most people are when they hear that name. She swallowed hard. I'm processing. A low, quiet sound escaped him, almost a laugh. That's generous of you. You're far too calm, she blurted out. You were almost killed tonight. His eyes darkened slightly, the warmth draining from them just enough to remind her who he was. I've been almost killed many times, he said. This was inconvenient, not unexpected. That sent a chill down her spine. Inconvenient, she repeated faintly. He nodded once. What's unexpected is where I ended up. Emma's brows knit together. You didn't just stumble in here? His gaze lifted to the doorway that led back to the empty diner, to the soft glow of Christmas lights reflecting in the stainless steel surfaces. No, he said quietly. I knew this place would still be open. Her heart skipped. How? I watch patterns, he replied simply. This diner closes later on holidays. One staff member. Always the same one. Her breath caught. You knew I'd be here. Yes, the word hung between them, heavy and intimate and dangerous. You were watching me? She whispered. Not like that, he said immediately, then paused. Not at first. 1,000 questions crowded her mind, but one cut through them all. Why? He leaned his head back against the wall, eyes briefly closing as if the answer cost him something. Because I needed a place no one would look, he said. And because you're kind. Her chest tightened painfully. Kind doesn't survive in my world, he continued. It draws attention. It creates weakness. She stood abruptly, needing distance. Then why come here? His eyes opened again, locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach flip. Because sometimes, he said softly, weakness is the only place left to run. The honesty in his voice startled her more than his name ever could have. Snow continued to fall outside. Christmas lights glowed steadily above them, and Emma realized something that made her hands tremble. Dominic Caruso hadn't just come to her diner to hide. He had come because on the loneliest night of the year, he trusted her to see him bleed, and not turn away. And that truth was far more dangerous than knowing his name. Emma paced the narrow back room, her footsteps soft against the concrete floor, trying to burn off the restless energy coiling in her chest. Dominic Caruso. The name echoed in her mind with every breath she took, colliding violently with the image of the bleeding man she had patched up under flickering Christmas lights. She stopped, turned back toward him. He hadn't moved much, still seated against the wall, still impossibly composed for someone who had been hunted and wounded. His eyes followed her calmly, tracking her like he always seemed to do, quiet, attentive, unsettlingly present. You said you didn't stumble in here, she said finally. You said you knew I'd be here. Yes. The single word sent a shiver through her. Emma folded her arms over her chest, not for warmth, but for grounding. Then tell me why. Because right now, it feels like I didn't just save a stranger. I stepped into something I don't understand. Dominic's gaze softened just a fraction. He shifted carefully, testing his injury, then nodded once as if making a decision. I came here for a reason, he said. Her pulse quickened. What reason? You. The word landed quietly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize it, and somehow that made it infinitely more dangerous. Emma shook her head. You don't know me. I know enough, he replied. I know you close alone every holiday. I know you don't rush customers out even when you're exhausted. I know you wipe the same counter twice when you're nervous. His eyes flicked briefly to the stainless steel surface behind her. Like you did tonight. Her breath caught. That's not... She stopped, swallowed. How long? Weeks. The room felt smaller. The lights hummed louder. You watched me? She asked again, more sharply now. I observed, he corrected calmly. There's a difference. Her laugh came out thin and brittle. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, he admitted. It's supposed to be honest. She searched his face for mockery, for manipulation, but found neither. Just certainty, and something else beneath it, something unsettlingly earnest. Why me? She whispered. Dominic exhaled slowly. Because you're alone. Her shoulders stiffened. I'm not... You are, he said gently, but firmly. You work nights. You walk home alone. You don't have anyone waiting for you when you lock that door. His eyes darkened. Men like me notice patterns and vulnerabilities. Fear flared in her chest. So I was a target? No. His voice sharpened, cutting that thought down instantly. Never that. Then what? He held her gaze steadily. You were a refuge." The word stunned her. "I needed somewhere no one would expect," he continued. "Somewhere untouched by my world. Somewhere run by someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone kind enough to help, but strong enough not to break." Emma's throat tightened painfully. "You don't get to decide that about me." His lips curved faintly, not amused, but thoughtful. "You decided it yourself. When you didn't scream, when you didn't run, when you pressed your hands into my wound and told me to stay awake." She looked down at her hands, suddenly hyper-aware of them. "You didn't treat me like what I am," Dominic said quietly. "You treated me like a man who needed help." Her chest ached. "That doesn't mean I want to be part of your life." "I know." She looked up sharply. "I never intended to pull you into it," he went on. "But tonight changed things. For both of us." "How?" she asked. "Because you know my name now. You know what I am, and you didn't flinch." Silence settled between them, heavy and intimate. "I didn't come here to trap you," Dominic said. "I came because I needed somewhere safe enough to bleed." Emma met his eyes. "And now?" His gaze held hers, unblinking. "Now," he said, "I can't pretend you're not part of this anymore." Her heart stuttered. "Part of what?" "My responsibility," he answered. "My protection." A chill slid down her spine. "I didn't agree to that." "No," he said softly, "but I agreed to it the moment I chose your diner." The truth hit her slowly, then all at once. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't chance. Dominic Caruso hadn't stumbled into her life bleeding and broken. He had chosen her, weeks ago, quietly, deliberately, watching from the shadows. And now that he was here, sitting under Christmas lights she'd strung with her own hands, he had no intention of walking back out of it alone. The first sound was so soft Emma almost convinced herself she imagined it. A crunch, then another. Snow under boots. Her breath caught, eyes snapping toward the front of the diner. The Christmas lights reflected faintly in the darkened windows, red and green smearing into shadows that suddenly felt too close, too alive. Dominic noticed instantly. His entire body changed, subtle, terrifying. The fatigue vanished from his posture, pain locked behind iron control. His head tilted slightly, listening, eyes narrowing with lethal focus. "How many?" he murmured. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. I don't know." Another crunch outside. Slower now. Careful. Dominic pushed himself to his feet despite the injury, jaw clenched hard enough that she could see the muscle jump. Before she could protest, his hand closed around her wrist and pulled her toward him. Not rough, not frantic, but decisive. "Lights," he whispered. She understood instantly. Emma reached up with trembling fingers and clicked them off one by one. The diner fell into dimness, lit only by the faint glow of the Christmas tree in the corner and the moonlight filtering through snow clouds. Shadows slid across the windows. Emma's pulse roared in her ears. Dominic moved her backward, placing himself between her and the glass, his body a wall of muscle and intent. He backed them into the narrow space between the counter and the back hallway. One hand braced against the counter, the other firm at her waist. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Not a request, a command. Her back pressed into his chest as he guided her there, shielding her completely. She could feel his breath against her hair, steady despite the danger, his heartbeat strong and controlled against her spine. "Dominic," she whispered, fear threading her voice. "They're here for you." "Yes," he said calmly. "And now they've found you too." Her stomach dropped. Outside, a shadow paused directly in front of the window. A hand brushed the glass, wiping snow away in a slow, deliberate motion. Emma's breath hitched. Dominic's arm tightened around her, drawing her closer, tucking her head beneath his chin, so her face was hidden from view. "Don't look," he murmured, "no matter what you hear." The door handle rattled. Once, twice. Emma flinched, fingers digging into his coat. He didn't move an inch. "Caruso," a voice called softly from outside. "We know you're in there." Dominic's lips brushed her temple as he leaned down just enough to whisper, "They won't come in. Not yet." "How can you be sure?" she whispered back. "Because they're afraid of me," he replied. "And curious about you." That made her blood run cold. The shadow shifted again, joined by another. 2 silhouettes now, pacing past the windows like predators circling prey. "You shouldn't have come alone," the voice continued. "But then, you always did like taking risks." Dominic's jaw tightened, his breath warming her ear. "If they enter, you run. Down the back hall. There's a door behind the storage room." "I'm not leaving you," Emma whispered fiercely. His hand tightened at her waist, fingers pressing in as if grounding himself. "You will," he said quietly, "because I won't have you hurt for my mistakes." His words settled heavy and intimate between them. The door handle rattled again, harder this time. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. Seconds stretched, then sirens in the distance. Faint, far away, but enough. The shadows stilled. One lingered at the window, head tilting as if trying to see past Dominic's body, past his claim. "We'll be in touch," the voice said calmly. "You can't hide forever." Footsteps retreated, crunching snow fading into the night. Only when the sounds were completely gone did Dominic exhale. His arm loosened, but he didn't release her. Emma realized she was shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, turning her to face him, hands firm but gentle as they checked her arms, her shoulders, her face. His eyes searched hers with naked intensity. "I think so," she whispered. "Are you?" A faint, dangerous smile curved his lips. "I've been worse." She swallowed, tears stinging her eyes, not from fear alone, but from the sudden, overwhelming awareness of what he'd done. He'd put himself in front of her, bleeding, hunted, unarmed, without hesitation. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes," Dominic replied, voice low and certain. "I did." He cupped her face, thumb brushing the corner of her eye where a tear threatened to fall. "You're no longer invisible, Emma," he murmured. "And anyone who comes through that door for me will have to go through me first." The Christmas lights flickered gently behind them, glowing against the darkness. And Emma understood then. Trouble hadn't just found the door, it had found her. Emma's hands were still trembling when Dominic finally stepped back from the window. The diner felt smaller now, like the walls had leaned in to listen to everything that had just happened. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly in the corner, absurdly cheerful against the echo of danger that hadn't fully left the air. "You need to come with me," Dominic said. The words were calm, measured, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath them. Emma shook her head immediately. "No, this is my job, my place. I can't just disappear." His gaze sharpened, frustration flickering for the first time. "You don't understand what you're standing in." "I understand enough," she shot back, fear hardening into stubbornness. "This is my life. I don't belong in yours." Dominic took a slow step toward her, then stopped, as if forcing himself not to crowd her. His jaw flexed. "You belong wherever you're breathing," he said quietly. "And right now, this place isn't safe." "I'm not leaving," she insisted. "They were looking for you, not me." "That's where you're wrong." Before she could argue again, the sound came back, this time louder. Not careful footsteps, running. The first window shattered. Glass exploded inward, raining down across the empty booths. Emma screamed, ducking instinctively as another crash followed, then a third. Shadows flooded the diner, boots pounding against tile, voices barking orders. Dominic moved instantly. He grabbed Emma by the waist and hauled her behind the counter, his body shielding hers as gunfire cracked through the air. Bullets tore into the wall behind them, shattering plates and sending porcelain shards skidding across the floor. "Stay down," he commanded, already moving. She barely saw him reach beneath the counter before he came back up with a gun in his hand. Sleek, black, familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. This was not a man improvising. This was a man returning to something he knew by heart. Dominic leaned out just enough to fire. The shot was precise, controlled, lethal. A man went down with a cry. Another rushed forward, and Dominic didn't hesitate. He moved fast, fluid like violence was a language he spoke fluently. He disarmed one attacker mid-stride, slammed him face first into a table, and fired again without breaking rhythm. Emma pressed her hands over her mouth, eyes wide, frozen between horror and awe. This was the Dominic people whispered about. Not the bleeding man under Christmas lights, not the quiet voice asking her to stay awake. This was power stripped of mercy. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. The remaining attackers fled, boots scrambling over broken glass and snow. Silence crashed down, heavy and ringing. Dominic stood in the center of the diner, chest rising and falling, gun still raised. Blood from his wound seeped through the bandage again, dark against his shirt, but he didn't seem to notice. His head snapped toward Emma. He crossed the distance in seconds, kneeling in front of her, hands firm but gentle as they gripped her arms. "Are you hit?" he demanded. "Emma, look at me. Are you hurt?" She shook her head rapidly, tears spilling over. I don't think so." He exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half restraint. His forehead dropped briefly to her shoulder, just for a second, long enough for her to feel how close he'd come to losing control completely. "I told you," he murmured, voice rough. "I told you this place wasn't safe." She stared at him, heart pounding. You killed them." "I protected you," he corrected softly, pulling back just enough to look at her. His eyes were dark, intense, unapologetic. "There's a difference." Sirens wailed in the distance now, real this time, closing fast. Dominic stood and extended his hand to her. It wasn't a command. It wasn't force. It was certainty. "You're coming with me," he said. "Not because I want to control you. Because I refuse to let you die for my enemy's curiosity." Emma looked around the ruined diner, the shattered windows, the blood on the floor, the Christmas lights flickering bravely through it all. Then she looked at him, at the man who had stepped in front of bullets for her, at the monster who had just proven every rumor true, and still knelt to make sure she was breathing. Her hand slid into his. "Okay," she whispered. Dominic closed his fingers around hers, solid and unyielding. And as he led her into the cold night, Emma understood one terrifying, undeniable truth. She hadn't been protected by accident. She had been claimed in the dark. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery and the distant echo of sirens far below. Emma stood with her arms wrapped around herself, Dominic a solid presence at her side. He'd draped his coat over her shoulders without asking, the fabric still warm from his body, smelling faintly of leather, snow, and something darker she couldn't name. The city fell away beneath them as the elevator climbed. Each floor felt like another layer separating her from the life she'd known just hours ago. The diner, the snow, the blinking Christmas lights. It all felt unreal now, like something she'd dreamed instead of lived. When the doors finally slid open, Emma stepped into a space that stole her breath. The penthouse was vast but understated, all glass and dark wood and muted light. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living area, revealing the city stretched out below like a constellation of gold and white. There were no garish displays of wealth, no excess. Everything here was controlled, intentional, restrained. Like Dominic himself. "Sit," he said gently, guiding her toward a couch near the windows. "I'll take care of this." She realized he meant his wound when she saw the faint grimace he tried, and failed, to hide as he moved. Blood had soaked through the bandage again, darker now. "You need stitches," she said automatically, her fear giving way to the instinct to help. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering through his eyes. "I know." She followed him to a smaller room off the main space, clearly a private medical suite. He sat on the edge of the table without protest as she carefully removed the makeshift dressing. The injury was ugly but clean, the kind of wound inflicted by someone who knew exactly where to aim. "You could have gone to a hospital," she said quietly as she cleaned it. "I could not," he replied just as softly. "Not tonight." She worked in silence for a moment, then couldn't stop herself. "You said you came to the diner on purpose." His jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." Emma looked up. "Why?" Dominic met her gaze fully then, and something in his expression shifted. The sharp edges softened, not into weakness, but into something rawer, more dangerous somehow. "I've been watching that place for weeks," he admitted. "Not because of business, because of you." Her hands stilled. "Me? You close alone every Christmas Eve," he said. "You hum while you clean. You give free pie to people who look like they need it more than they need dignity. You never rush anyone, even when you should." Emma swallowed. "That's creepy," she said weakly. He huffed a quiet, humorless breath. "I know how it sounds." "Then why?" Dominic leaned back slightly, careful not to pull away from her touch completely. "Because my world is cold," he said. "Calculated. Everything has a cost. Everyone wants something. And I don't." "You didn't," he said simply. "Not from me. Not ever." Her chest tightened. "When I was bleeding out in an alley tonight," he continued, "I didn't think about my men, or my enemies, or the deals waiting to be closed." She finished securing the bandage, her fingers brushing his skin. "What did you think about?" "You," he said without hesitation. "The warmth of that stupid diner. The way you look people in the eye like they matter." Silence filled the room, thick and intimate. "That's why I came," he went on. "I needed somewhere safe, somewhere real, and I knew, if I walked through your door, you wouldn't turn me away." Emma sat back on her heels, stunned. "You barely knew me." "I knew enough," he said, "and tonight proved it." She looked around the penthouse again, suddenly seeing it differently. Not as a fortress, but as a refuge built by someone who didn't know how to let anyone inside. "This is a safe house," he added quietly. "For you. No one knows you're here." "And after?" she asked. Dominic's gaze dropped to where her hands rested in her lap, then rose slowly back to her face. "After, we'll see." The honesty in his voice scared her more than any threat could have. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, brushing against the glass like a secret being kept. Emma realized then that Dominic Caruso hadn't just come to her diner to survive. He'd come because, somewhere deep inside, the man everyone feared was desperate for warmth. And now that he'd found it, he wasn't going to let it go. Emma woke slowly, wrapped in unfamiliar warmth. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too large, the sheets too soft, the quiet too complete. Pale winter light filtered through sheer curtains, painting the room in silver and gold. Snow drifted lazily past the windows, the city hushed beneath it. Then she heard it. A faint clatter, a muttered curse, the unmistakable sound of something being dropped. Emma pushed herself upright, heart thudding. Not in fear this time, but curiosity. She slipped from the bed, Dominic's coat still folded neatly over the chair where he'd left it for her, and padded barefoot toward the sound. The kitchen came into view, and she stopped short. Dominic Caruso stood at the stove. Not bleeding, not furious, not surrounded by men with guns. Just standing there in a dark t-shirt, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly rumpled, staring down at a frying pan like it had personally offended him. There was a plate of unevenly cut fruit on the counter. Toast, some of it a little too dark. A carton of eggs opened beside the stove. The faint smell of coffee hung in the air. He looked human, almost shy if she dared say it. He noticed her reflection in the glass and turned, eyes softening instantly when they found her. "Morning," he said quietly. "Merry Christmas," she replied, her voice just as soft. For a second, neither of them moved. The silence wasn't awkward. It was careful, like they were both afraid to shatter something fragile. "I don't do this," Dominic said finally, gesturing vaguely at the stove. "So, if it's terrible—" "It smells good," she said, stepping closer. That earned her a small, surprised smile. Not the sharp curve he used in meetings, not the dangerous one his enemies feared, just a brief, unguarded thing. They sat together at the kitchen island, sharing the slightly overcooked breakfast. Dominic watched her more than he ate, like he was confirming she was real, still there. "You should be resting," she said gently. "Your wound—" "I am," he replied. "This is rest for me." She studied him, really studied him in the quiet daylight. The man who had walked through gunfire without flinching now looked unsure of where to put his hands. "Emma," he said suddenly. "Yes?" His gaze dropped to the coffee between them, then lifted again. "You didn't just save my life last night." She frowned slightly. "Dominic, you saved the part of me I thought was already dead." The words landed heavily between them. She didn't interrupt. "I've spent years surviving," he continued. "Winning, controlling, eliminating threats before they get close enough to matter. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "When I walked into your diner, bleeding and hunted, you didn't see a boss or a monster. You saw a man who needed help, and you helped me without asking what it would cost you." Emma's chest ached. "Anyone would have—" "No," he said firmly. "They wouldn't have. They didn't." He reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand, as if asking permission without words. When she didn't pull back, his fingers closed around hers, warm, steady. "That warmth," he said quietly. "That kindness. It reminded me of who I was before everything else hardened me. Before I learned that love is leverage, and softness gets you buried." She swallowed. "And now?" "Now," he said, voice low and honest. "I don't want to lose it again." The city outside stirred slowly, Christmas morning unfolding somewhere far below. Bells rang faintly in the distance. Snow continued to fall. Emma squeezed his hand gently. "I'm not something you can keep safe by locking it away," she said. "I don't want to be a thing you lose." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, reverent. "I know. That's what scares me." They sat there together, the most feared man in the city, and the woman who had patched him up beside Christmas lights, sharing silence that felt like a beginning instead of an end. For the first time in years, Dominic Caruso wasn't planning for war. He was thinking about how to protect something fragile without destroying it, and Emma realized something else, something that made her heart beat faster instead of slower. She didn't feel trapped. She felt chosen. The room glittered with money and menace. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors. Evergreen garlands wound around iron railings. Soft carols played from somewhere unseen, the melody almost mocking against the presence of men who had ordered deaths with the same mouths now sipping champagne. Emma felt it the moment she stepped inside. This was not a party. It was a gathering of power. Dominic's hand rested at the small of her back, firm and unmistakably possessive. Not guiding, claiming. Every step she took, she was acutely aware of how many eyes followed her. Conversations softened as they passed. Laughter dulled. Respect and fear hung thick in the air. She wore a simple black dress Dominic had sent that morning. Elegant, modest, nothing flashy. Yet she felt more exposed than she ever had in her diner apron. Because here, she wasn't invisible. She was noticed. "Breathe," Dominic murmured beside her, lips brushing her ear. "No one here will touch you." That should have frightened her. Instead, it grounded her. They moved deeper into the room, Dominic acknowledging men with nods and brief words. Emma recognized the subtle shifts, how people straightened when he approached, how smiles turned cautious. This was his kingdom, and he ruled it without raising his voice. A man stepped forward near the bar, well-dressed, confident, dangerous in the quiet way. His gaze flicked to Emma, lingered too long. "Didn't know we were bringing civilians now," he said lightly, though the test in his tone was unmistakable. The room seemed to pause. Dominic stopped walking. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled Emma closer until her side was flush with his arm sliding around her waist like it belonged there. She felt the subtle tension ripple through him. Not anger yet, but warning. He didn't raise his voice, didn't smile. "She patched me up," Dominic said calmly. "She saved me." The man blinked once. Dominic's grip tightened just enough that Emma felt it. Not painful, not rough. Reassuring. Final. "She's mine now." Silence fell heavy and absolute. No one questioned him. No one laughed. No one argued. The man who had spoken lifted his glass in a stiff gesture of acknowledgement and stepped back into the crowd without another word. Emma's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the weight of what had just happened. She was marked, not with ink, not with threats, with words spoken in a room where words decided who lived comfortably and who didn't live at all. Dominic leaned down slightly. "If you want to leave," he said quietly, "we leave." She looked up at him, really looked, at the man who had stumbled bleeding into her diner, who had let her touch his wounds, who cooked her breakfast awkwardly and watched her like she was something precious and breakable, who now stood unchallenged in a room full of predators, placing himself between her and the world without hesitation. "I don't," she said. His eyes searched her face as if looking for doubt, for fear, for regret. He found none. A corner of his mouth curved, not into a smile, but something close, something private. "Good," he said. The rest of the night passed in a blur of soft conversations and careful distance. No one approached her directly. No one questioned her place. Wherever Dominic moved, she moved with him, his hand never leaving her waist, his presence a shield she hadn't realized she'd been craving. At one point, his fingers brushed hers, a silent check-in. She squeezed back. Later, when snow fell outside again and the city glowed with Christmas lights, Dominic guided her onto the balcony overlooking the street. The cold air bit gently at her skin. "You don't belong to this world," she said softly, staring out at the lights below. "No," he agreed. "But it belongs to me." She turned to him. "And me?" His gaze softened, not weakened, focused. "You belong where you choose," he said. "I won't cage you, Emma. I won't force you. But I will protect what chooses to stay." She stepped closer, closing the small space between them herself this time. "Then I'm choosing," she said. His hand came up, cupping her face with reverence that contradicted everything people feared about him. His thumb brushed her cheek, slow and certain. "Merry Christmas," Dominic murmured. And in the glow of city lights and falling snow, Emma understood the truth fully at last. She hadn't just patched up a wounded man. She had stepped into a life that would never let her fall again, and for the first time, she didn't want to walk away.